I'm very bullish. I think I had a lot of ups and down periods during my career. I've seen the highs and the lows and everything in between. But I am looking forward to a resounding bull in the commodity space over the rest of my career.
We're proud to have Tectonic Metals as a sponsor of Liberty and Finance.
Hey everyone, this is Elijah K. Johnson with Liberty and Finance. And back with us today is our good friend Tony Reda, the CEO and president of Tectonic Metals, a mining exploration company. Tony, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. And it's also a very distinguished pleasure to have Quinton Hennigh, who is a globally renowned exploration geologist with 30 plus years experience in the precious metal mining sector. He currently serves as the in-house geologic and technical advisor for Crescat Capital. Quinton, thank you so much for joining us today.
Pleasure to be here.
Well, I wanted to start with you, Quinton, because right now we're seeing, metals pretty much take off in the last couple of weeks, and there's a lot more. There are more eyes on the precious metal sector right now, and it's really important to understand, well, where do metals come from in the first place? How do we get them out of the ground, and how do we really identify projects that are really have potential, right? So if you could, with your vast experience looking at projects globally, and now being the in-house geologic and technical advisor for Crescat, can you kind of explain for our viewers, how do you find a good project? And how do you identify opportunities that are going to really prove successful in the future?
Yeah, certainly. Look, we look at a lot of opportunities. I get probably 15, 20 opportunities to invest in private placements each and every week. And some of the stories I know, some of the stories I don't know. And I have to screen these things. I have to look at them and determine what is which ones work, which ones are going to be ones that we think could return significant multiples through their exploration work. All right. Now, I have a kind of a mental checklist of what I screen. And, it starts with jurisdiction, believe it or not. Jurisdiction is number one. I look around and I say, can you build a mine in the location this company is focused? Okay. There are places in the world, for whatever reason, if it's the country itself or if it's, a specific jurisdiction within the country, perhaps there's sensitivities around environmental issues, something like this. There's a lot of places you cannot build a mine. So that's the first on my checklist. I got to know that the company can build a mine or the project can be successful. Second thing I ask is it big? Is it a story, even if it's early stage? Is it a big story that could really be a significant, discovery? Is it going to be something that a major mining company is going to want to buy? Right. So that's the next part. Now, along with that, I got to understand if the company has secured all of the land it needs. Okay. There's a lot of companies that have like a little postage stamp on a big target. And, until they kind of clean up their land, consolidate it, I usually don't touch them. Okay. I like to see big land packages that cover big targets. All right. And then the next on the checklist is really the technical team. I like to see companies that have a good, strong technical team. One, they don't have to have everything they need in-house, but they have to have a willingness to work with me on the exploration strategy, what the company plans to do, how they're going to approach exploring things. We are what we call an activist investor. We're not activist in the hostile sense. We're activist in the sense of helping the companies be successful as much as possible and also telling their story. So we like to see good teams that have a lot of smarts and a willingness to work with us to make their discovery a success. All right. So those are the basics. There's a lot more, obviously, I could go into, but I'll kind of start there.
And I did want to turn to Tony now. Can you kind of explain for you what makes a tectonic project, if I can use that word, and what gets your attention when considering new projects?
For sure. Well, I'm going to take a page out of Quinton's book. Nothing new there, perhaps, but it does start with jurisdiction. So a tectonic project, and this is legitimately a true story. When we started the company, Ira Thomas, one of the co-founders, and myself, we were getting presented opportunities all over. And the first thing we needed to establish a filter, and that filter for us was, would we take our kids there? And we thought, that would be basically, that embodies a bunch of things, but, is this a jurisdiction that we can work in safely, operate in, things of that nature? What's the government regime like, the political regime? Can you build a mine there? Are there examples of other mines? Will land tenure, permitting, local First Nations or Native, any risk on that side? Are they pro-business? Are they pro-mining? These are all, and workability. I recall distinctly at Kaminak with our Coffee Gold project, we brought up probably about 4 senior VPs from a mining company, and I won't say the name. And we sat in a boardroom in Whitehorse before flying out to the project the next day. And these VPs, we presented our project to them, and this is in the Yukon Territory of Canada. And one of the things that they stood out when it was asked, what do you like about this project by the top level senior VP, and one of the lower VPs replied, same time zone, workability, we can go there. So these are things that are perhaps sometimes neglected by investors, but things that are really important to a company. So tectonic projects definitely have to tick that criteria. And for us, we don't care about small, and neither do major mining companies. And if I can be so bold, I don't think Crescat cares about those either. In my experience, whether as an investor or as an executive, it takes just as much time and energy to find a 1 million ounce gold deposit as it does 5 million ounces. So all that criterion work, it just behooves us to play big. And the major mining companies don't care about small. A lot of the CEOs from these companies are talking about tier 1 deposits. So we try to see that on day one. And a lot of people are like, well, how do you see that? It's kind of like trying to identify Michael Jordan at the age of 5 or age 7, and then he grows and matures. What do you see? And sometimes you don't get it right, but we like to see scale first and foremost. We like to see like the jurisdiction, the environment. We do a lot of due diligence on that front. Who owns the land is another thing that we ask. And, a lot of people say grade is king, and I totally agree with that, but I would add another layer and say, what is the margin of an ounce you find? And that's where metallurgy and engineering, all the economic side of things, like you can find gold, but then how do you get that gold out of the ground profitably and economically? And if you start with the mine in mind as the sort of as a starting point, you then can reverse engineer that right down to where you're putting a drill collar location. So those are some of the things that let's say that Tectonic project embodies is, we won't focus on small. We want to see great or high margin ounce visibility, jurisdiction, political risk, as many boxes ticked as possible before we decide to say, hey, let's go out and acquire this project.
Now, Quinton, if we could turn to you, when it comes to really Tectonic's Project Flat and also other projects that you've looked at recently, Snowline and Fort Knox, these are intrusion-related gold deposits. So what about those particular projects and intrusion-related gold deposits really catches your attention?
There's a number of factors. I would put metallurgy at the top of the list. These deposits, if you're in the right part of the system, the right zone within the overall complex, they can be very metallurgically favorable. All right. They tend to have what we call free milling gold. So you can see, for example, lots of gravity recoverable gold, but also easily soluble gold. So when it comes time to leach it, like in a mill setting or a heap leach, it is readily accessible and can be recovered. All right, so metallurgy is key. The size of these things is also important. This is remote country. The Tintina Belt, pretty much as a whole, is remote, and you're going to have to find something that's big. These tend to be very, very big systems. They're associated with granite intrusions that came up, and they tend to have a big footprint. Like they're not just they're more like a porphyry deposit than they are, say, like a small vein deposit or something like that. Okay, so these things, they're typically amenable to open pit mining, to conventional milling, heap leaching, things like that. So these are projects that the major mining companies are hungry for right now. They need to find, 10 plus million ounce discoveries to really make a dent in the shortfall that most of them have right now in their overall resource base and their business model. So I think the Tintina Belt is ripe. I think looking for other types of deposits in this belt, probably not so keen on, like the Carlin type mineralization that ATEC found, for example, things like this. No, give me a Tintina type gold deposit any day.
Now, Tony, could you respond to that? And also, you really laid out the criteria of what really makes a good mineral deposit. Can you expand on why the Flat project really meets that criteria?
Most definitely. So the Flat project literally came about by asking the question, can the Kuskokwim mineral belt, which is the same mineral belt that hosts Flat, and the Donlin gold deposit, so can the Kuskokwim mineral belt host another 45 million ounce gold deposit, which Donlin, co-owned by Barrick and Nova Gold, currently own and are in the process of finishing their permitting and mine optimization studies on. And so my criteria, most gold deposits aren't one-offs. They sometimes can occur. And if this mineral belt can produce one, there's a strong possibility that there could be another one. And so that's how it all started. And when I approached our native partner by the name of Doyle Limited, they're one of Alaska's largest native corporations and the largest private landholder in the state of Alaska. I asked them, what do you have in this belt? And the VP at that time replied, I have this project that Robert Friedland worked on. And then all of a sudden, boom, 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 like Robert Friedland's a very recognizable name. He's also noted with the discovery and advancement of the Fort Knox gold mine and is in the Hall of Fame because of that. So I was like, okay, well, wait a minute, this is a credible name and he's worked on this project. So I started digging. So already some of the boxes started to get ticked, so to speak. But what drew us in is really the Flat is the fourth richest placer mining jurisdiction. So 1.4 million ounces of gold has been produced via placer mining in the streams and creeks. And what is touted as the source for that gold is Flat's primary target called Chicken Mountain. And lo and behold, the historical data at Chicken Mountain supports or states a 4 kilometer plus 200 ppb gold and soil anomaly. So how do you identify Michael Jordan at a young age? How do you define it? How do you find a large gold system at a early on? Well, 4K by 1K gold and soil, that's a massive footprint. So we look for structure, scale in the structure, the mineral belt, and then localized with this big footprint. You have this placer gold endowment, and the question becomes, how big is the source now for that gold? So Flat had all of that going for itself. And then when we dig a bit further into the data, we then see 55 drill holes primarily by two different operators at two different times. And every hole hit gold mineralization. Now, some of it's not spectacular grade, but there is 200 gram per ton in the drill core. And like Quinton noted, a lot of these bulk tonnage intrusion related gold systems can be lower tenor. So metallurgy is extremely important. And we then took it one step further. So, okay, if we acquire this, what would we do? As part of our business model, we have a 3-year plan. And the first thing I noted was, in order to make this project work, given its location, and also just given the, in general, it's a good thing to do as a box ticking exercise, is do metallurgy as quickly as possible. And thankfully, our native partners stored the drill core in a warehouse over the years, and we could access it. So I was like, okay, 55 drill holes hit gold mineralization. I can do metallurgy off the hop. And that, you're talking about a $500,000 or $250,000 program just in that. And I can get answers to questions, and that will give me the confidence to target some of the lower grade mineralization. Everyone thinks the higher grade is kind of a no-brainer. Higher grade is going to work. But every gold system that I've been involved with has a lower grade component. If you can get that to work, then everything else is kind of gravy. So Flat offered all of that to us. And we're quite lucky that it sat on a shelf with our native partner for 20 plus years. Like I said, the largest private landholder. So unless you have a relationship with this group, you didn't really know about this opportunity. And now I'm pretty excited to obviously advance. We're in our first year of exploration work, and next year is drilling. So we'll be stay tuned for that.
Quinton, I know that because of the Flat project, you doubled your investment in Tectonic. Can you expand a bit on the reasoning for that? And again, why you're so favorable towards Tectonic because of the Flat project?
Yeah, look, they've had the project for a while now, but it was really just recently here that it was clear that they could start advancing it. In fact, they did some field work late season of this year. And I did get a chance to review the project in detail earlier this year. as I could see it kind of coming off the shelf and attention being focused on it. And look, I know this area fairly well because I worked for a major mining company. They had a program in the Kuskokwim region. So, to me, it was a bit of a no-brainer. But after I saw the data, saw the drilling, that indeed did hit gold. Virtually every hole that was drilled historically has hit long intervals of gold mineralization. And the geology that it hit too. I mean, importantly, it's seeing all the right types of rocks, the right style of mineralization and so forth. I was fully compelled this is a true Tintina type or tombstone type gold system. And the footprint of it is clearly large enough to host, a 10 plus million ounce deposit. So there's no question this is a beast. And for us, that's the kind of story we like. We like to jump into things that will be world-class discoveries bought by a major.
And I know in a previous update with Tectonic, you had referred to the Leapfrog model. How does that play into Tectonic right now?
I do a lot of review of these projects. I don't just kind of, invest in where I feel lucky. I like to have a bit of review. And I, was fortunate to get this kind of depth to make that decision. What stood out to me is that many of the holes hit long intervals of mineralization, continuous runs of mineralization, very much like you would want to see in a Tintina type gold system. Occasional high grade hits like Tony's mentioned. But what really, really stood out there were two things. One was that many of the holes are open at depth. In other words, they ended in mineralization. So that tells me there's a lot of runway, at depth. And one of the keys around a system like this is the lateral dimension that you're working with, the strike length of the system. You can often see the same profile going to depth. And, really the only drilling that's been done here to date is on the order of maybe 150 meters deep or something like that. I think there might be one or two holes that go over that, but not much. So very thin skin approach to exploration. And, when holes end in 1 gram plus rock, after hitting many, many tens of meters of it, you reckon there's going to be more. Okay, so that was one thing that stood out. Second thing that stood out is the geochemical zonation around this system. Here they obviously see gold, and they have elevated arsenic, which is it's not terribly elevated, but it's slightly elevated. But they're seeing just little snippets of elevated bismuth and tellurium. Bismuth and tellurium are more towards the core of a gold system like this. All right. So what that tells me is that even though this drilling was quite successful and found quite a bit of gold mineralization, they still haven't found the core, which I believe is somewhat below the surface at depth. So, back to the vertical nature of the system, I think there's a lot of vertical runway to find that core. And when they do, I think you could have an absolutely killer gold deposit here. This thing could be much, much larger than we currently perceive.
No, Tony, I did want to ask you, because we originally got connected because you were invited to the Rule Symposium. And it's amazing to have, the endorsement of Rick Rule. And it's also so great to have the, strategic holder like Crescat. Can you expand on the importance of really having Crescat in your corner right now?
Yeah, definitely. It's obviously a huge plus for a multitude of reasons. As we've all experienced, and we're kind of still in it, markets can turn quite ugly. And having those strategic investors that are not a one-off, let's just say, that are aligned with management or the teams, the vision of the company, and also the potential of the projects, it's good. You have a shoulder to lean on during those times. And I will say, to Crescat's credit, they've been that shoulder a few times now, because we've been in terrible markets for quite some time. So strategic shareholders can provide that support. They also are a validation stamp when they have people like Quinton, yes, on the geological side, but also Kevin and Tavi, the CIO, and the two CIOs there that make the investment decisions and the market analysis. So you have a trifecta of, if you will, because you need that geological endorsement. And if someone says Quinton likes this project and Crescat's investing in it, you know that they've done their technical due diligence, but you also know that they've done their market and the other side of the equation, the corporate due diligence as well. So it's extremely beneficial to have that. I can tell you I have the best thing since sliced bread. but having someone else independent or outside of the company saying that, and Quinton's not on the payroll, he has no options or anything of that nature in our company, is extremely more powerful and helps communicate the story. And being as they call themselves, an activist shareholder, they definitely help get the word out. So you get validation on the team, the company, the projects, you get endorsement, you get that shoulder to lean on during terrible times, if you will. And we do get to tap into Quinton's technical wherewithal that, we look at projects through a lens. And, I always say, if you have 4 geologists in a room, you're going to get 6 opinions. But that's healthy. It's healthy to debate that. So Quinton, without hands down, has seen more projects than I have, or definitely more than our team. So he brings a different lens to the project, to the opportunity. And it's like, oh yeah, maybe I should look at this, and so we have technical guidance that's kind of, I hate to say this, so don't change, but free of charge in many ways. And I'm going to take advantage of that.
Quinton, if we could, before we let you go, get your take on the metal sector right now, because in the last couple of weeks, we've seen a dramatic rise in both gold and silver. How do you think that's going to be impacting the miners and exploration companies in the near future?
Yeah, look, what's driving metal prices, or what will drive it going forward, in my view, is really 2 things. I mean, the demand is one side of the equation. Okay. We are seeing China open up again. We're seeing, even though, there's potential for recession in the US and in the West, we'll call it, there is increased demand. As a whole, the world is seeing increased demand, even in recessionary times. Okay. This is not the 1960s or 70s, or this is a different environment. Okay, now the second thing that's going to drive commodities is supply side. Okay, we have not spent enough money on exploration, on developing new mines. And I think this is going to lead to a very, very long bull in the commodity space. The population of this planet is not decreasing, it's going up. And as we see more and more people come on, especially coming out of poverty and into the middle class, there's a greater and greater demand for resources. And on the supply side, we have done an absolutely horrible job of going out and finding and developing the next generation of mines. So I'm very bullish. I think, I had a lot of ups and down periods during my career. I've seen, the highs and the lows and everything in between. But I am looking forward to a resounding bull in the commodity space over the rest of my career.
All right. Well, Tony and Quinton, we really appreciate your time today and really sharing the opportunities out there in the mining and exploration sector here, because it seems like, we're definitely seeing a rise in the metal sector, and that's very possible to continue. And exploration companies and mining companies are one of the great ways to take advantage of that, but you have to pick the right ones. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, both Tony and Quinton, today. If people are interested in learning more about Tectonic, Tony, where can they find you?
All the social media channels, you can reach us. Tectonic Metals Inc. has a LinkedIn page, Facebook page, things of that nature. But you can also reach out to me directly, Tony@tectonicmetals.com or info@tectonicmetals.com.
Quinton, where can people find Crescat?
Yeah, look, the website is crescat.net. Okay, so a lot of people think it's .org, .com, nope, .net. My email, just so people know, QUENNIGH@Crescat.net.
Fantastic. Tony and Quinton, thank you once again for joining us today, and God bless.
Thanks.
Thank you for having us.